welcome back to Devlog number 17. So, started off the week on Monday working on finishing up the save load functionality. I got it working for the test scene, working nicely so I could save and reload, and I tested it in an actual build, and it worked as expected, with some basic controls. It just loaded up how it should be. So that means that it saves the scriptable objects to a file in the build, and we don't have the problem where it's only for the editor only. So that'll work how it should. Then I moved and actually implemented that functionality for basic saving and loading in the actual game, so I'm tracking the state of the character. So I added a save and load to the pause screen. So if you save it here, there's no message or anything, but it does that. And then let's just say we move over here, and then we say load. Then he's back there with his with his position and rotation. So that works in the build also. Awesome. Worked exactly as I wanted it to with the system with different um, let's see here, with different value markers. See here, these are put in there, so that the save file location, the save name, all working great. So I was working with the UI a bit, and I was having some trouble the first kind of pass, like adding these two new buttons to the menu screen. For some reason, the system, when you put it in order, it didn't reload, and when you go from continue and you hit the down on the joystick, it would actually go to the next one. It would skip over, and it's like, what's happening? So the system automatically was not doing it right. So I had to go in there and fiddle around and set it manually, and then it connected right. So it's just a little bit of trial and error, but I eventually, like all things, eventually got it working. So on Tuesday, I turned to some of the issues that I've seen before in the previous week, issues with head tracking being broken. Basically, let's see. Um, Basically, I made a change to the head tracking so that there used to be an external object here already placed in the scene, but that wouldn't work for scalability. You'd have to, for every enemy, you'd have to place an external object and hook up the object in references each time. So I wanted to make the spider bot dynamically create his own aim target and then set it to the scene, just so it's independent. But that broke things, so I had to figure out a way in order to make the actual head tracking, uh, the actual head tracking work. There's some issue where you have to add a source object, and you can't just add it. What I was doing before, it's specifically an array, not a list, so you have to do it in a specific way and use the system. But I messed around and I eventually got it working right, and now the aim target is relative and external to the scene and dynamic, and initialized on load through the code. Um, So got the head tracking working, and I fixed up issues with the is attacked state. So a lot of issues surrounding the FSM when you attack the um, specifically on certain states, testing like if you're seen, not seen. So I did a bunch of robust testing where if you are lost and then you attack again, like specifically when he loses the target and you attack again, the actual head tracking position would remain on the last known target, and he would be running at you but looking backwards. So, and along the way, I spotted a bunch of several issues regarding, the was attack state and head tracking in general that I ironed out one at a time. So really ironing out that behavior and polishing it up so I couldn't see any obvious issues. One of the last ones was music transitions. So there was issues with Fmod where the transition from one level of music to the other, it felt kind of choppy, like the tracks were out of sync and the beats were kind of not synced up. So a lot of testing and kind of sorted that out to a state where it's sounding much better, and also reworking and finalizing the transition state behavior, like the what happens in certain stages of the FSM and how the music behaves. Um, like if you stay in the combat state too long, it transitions to third intensity, or if he's on patrol and you attack him, they'll transit right to the third transition of the state, and it makes sure everything's solid with the music transition. So on Wednesday, I wrapped up the last of the combat music issues, and one of the things I figured out how to do was set up some debug functionality in order to make the scene camera follow the character around in the desired rotation without having to update it. This will really help in the testing, like when I'm testing the object that's moving around, the AI controller or something else. Oop, I don't want to fall off the edge here. No, that way. There you go. Yeah, so it tracks them around the scene, so I can see testing gizmos, and the camera's moving with him, so I don't have to manually adjust each time he moves out of frame. So last bug was working on the laser array. There was some sort of clipping issue going on when the camera would go out of frame. The actual red lasers would clip out. So looking at it and doing a lot of testing, coming to realize it's not actually the mesh, the underlying mesh that's clipping out and being culled when the frame goes out of camera. It's actually the VFX. So what was happening, I had to learn about, with meshes and also with VFX, there's something called a bounding that the camera uses whether to choose whether to clip it or not. And I had to go in and specifically use a tool to record the bounds of the VFX of how it's used, because it was off. It wasn't set automatically. And that did the trick. That solved the problem. So just a bit of learning new things about that. So I wanted to improve the development time, and one of the things was always happening every time you reload and hit play, you get a pop-up box, and it'd always be saying like something like XR package editor. I did a little improvement by removing one file. I'm not sure if I broke anything, but it's still the XR package is always taking a second or two extra to load its thing, even though you're not really using it. So I decided to say, to go and clean up the XR frameworks inside my project, to remove them and then do a clean install build and get my XR working again, with just the bare minimum, because I had a lot of extra stuff installed. I didn't really want, maybe I could eliminate anything else that was not needed. Pretty much got it working again, but it's still the same problems where, it's doing extra loading that's not needed. So, I got it working again, but I'm gonna have to figure out how to maybe remove that package when it's not needed for long-term development. Then when I need to test VR, then actually pop it back in there so I can use XR. One of the last things I wanted to do was to, now that XR is working, is to actually get the game manager able to load the XR camera correctly for each of the states. Right now it does the regular camera, but I think the XR camera is actually broken for the game manager. So I actually didn't get to that, but on Thursday I was getting to the end of my feature epics. um, where, let's see, I was looking at the things to do, and I was saying like, okay, what am I gonna do next here? But I was kind of coming to the realization that I I was getting the feeling that I didn't want to proceed any further. I was saying, okay, I got the core features, but at this point, I don't want to just add new features for the sake of adding new features. That doesn't seem right because I understand that as a solo developer, there's only so much I can deliver, and I can't just implement, the whole kitchen and the kitchen sink, and expect to deliver that. At this point, I have the core features that were obvious to develop that I knew that I needed in my game, but now I'm getting the features that I could develop, but it's not so obvious whether I should include them in the game or not. Whether it's worth the effort and whether it's worth the effort to kind of employ them all throughout the game. So at this point, I kind of took a step back and said, okay, I did a lot of project management work in the beginning. The first 3 weeks of really sitting down and deciding, the first choice of the game, what had to be chosen on. Is it going to be a horror survival game or is it going to be a sci-fi stealth action game, right? I decided to go with the stealth action game, but I kind of left the rest lying on the table for now and decided to work on the core features and the functionality gym, and that's what I could do without having to put more thought into it. But now at this point, it's like I really have to sit back down and I have to make some more critical decisions about the roadmap of the game before proceeding on further. Otherwise, I'm going to run into design issues. So it got past the first stage of the project, but now it's the next stage of the turning point, how to proceed further. Um, so I did a lot of researching, a lot of thinking over the next 2 days, building upon my initial plan, which I started about 4 months ago, answering these critical questions that I'd put off until now. How to define the width of the thing? How long is the game going to be? What can I deliver as a solo developer? And then what is the height of the game? Meaning, what is the consistent quality across all the levels and the number of features? Now, these multiply, width and height multiply to determine the amount, the time, and cost to develop the title. So, you could have a long game with limited features, and that would be less cost. But if you have a lot of features and a long game, that would multiply the time to develop. So, at the end of the day, I have to set realistic goals, deliverable goals. Um, so, so at this point, the new features should be chosen carefully. If I want something in there like a mechanic to control a vehicle, like a mech or something, that should be really chosen with purpose, not just be like, oh, that would be cool if I did this. It would cost time to develop, and I might not use it. Like, who knows, right? So I did a lot more imagining of how the game will play and how it will look in concept. Really kind of, the rough idea, but really kind of imagining in further detail how it's going to be, how it's going to play. Um, at the end of the day, I decided on a 3.5 level structure, meaning 3 levels, 3.5 levels, right? Each of the first 3 levels being about 2 hours long in content and on average, and the last half being half of the level, so about an hour, right? Each of the end of the levels has a boss, and the half level has the final boss encounter. So it's a kind of a tried and true structure, but I don't want to get too crazy and experimental with my first game. I want to go with something I know that would work, something reliable. So this means the game's not too short, but it's also long enough for an indie developer me that can possibly deliver it. So around 7 hours of content, I think it's average. I've seen a lot of the other indie games who deliver with success, deliver a 2-hour game, deliver a 4-hour game, right? So I think, a goal to deliver a little bit more than that is acceptable. So I did a lot of things. I sat down and kind of analyzed what is it that I look for in a video game before I buy one. What's the process? What gets me interested in the purchase? Step-by-step analysis, kind of analyzing what quality and tier of games do I actually purchase, right? And there's several tiers of quality ranging from bad, okay, meh, to good, to great, to awesome, right? Um, I usually don't go any lower than good games. And, good games consist of a lot of things, but essentially it's about the sum of its components, right? It's all of the components that make up a game. Do they average out to the quality of good? The music, the sound effects, the gameplay, the story, blah blah blah. So that's the kind of the bar I have to meet. I'm shooting for a good game. If it's a great game, that's okay, but it has to be at least good, you know, in order to capture me as a game buyer, but also the market, what I assume the market's looking for in a game. So, um, the next decision I really had to come down to is, you know, three choices. Is it going to be a VR only game? Is it going to be VR supported or no VR? So VR only means, headset only, like kind of like a game like Moss, where you have to have the headset, you have to have the XR controllers. It's designed for VR. VR supported means, yeah, you can use the controller, the keyboard, and it has headset support. Um, but it doesn't have XR interaction support. You can't support all platforms like that. Or just simply no VR, right? Just your standard game, top-down game with no VR. Kind of like we're seeing on the screen. So I really sat down and thought carefully, listed the pros and cons for each, and came to the decision of VR only. And there's several reasons. The XR interaction is the big one. So I can't support X interaction with other platforms, and just having stealth and action alone, I don't think is enough variety for each area. You have to have that XR interaction if you're gonna take advantage of the stereoscopic VR gaming. So throwing that out the window wouldn't be worth it. And also, if I supported regular non-stereoscopic VR, then one of the things I'd be doing, I would be missing out on a lot of the environmental work, the rotation of the camera, looking around at the wide environment to get a sense of presence while you're in the game. You could have that in the VR mode, but it would be wasted in the normal mode. It would just be wasted environmental work. So it really doesn't make too much sense to do that. So I want to do stereoscopic gaming to feel like you're in the game, interacting with the game. You're in, you get that sense of immersion. And so the VR market is definitely smaller market to sell into than the regular PC market. But there is room for smaller indie titles to deliver smaller experiences, like 2 4-hour experiences and stuff like that. So, and there is examples of success. Um, but that's kind of my rationale and thinking in the direction that I'm going. I'd like to support the whole deal, but I really don't think it would work for what I'm trying to do. Supporting, as an indie developer, supporting the XR controller and controller, and the keyboard, doing all that support. It's just not. I have to kind of decide, cut it down, and say, okay, we're just going to do XR interaction, right? If I had to make one game and had to go one direction, I have to make a choice. This is the way I'm going to go. For better or for worse, for right or for wrong. Will these critical decisions, these paths, turn out right? Will it be a good choice, or will it turn out that that's not what I should have done? So, but anyway, that's my choice. Um, see what else we have here. So the combination of stealth, action, and XR interaction puzzles, I think, will combine to deliver interesting variety of gameplay over the course of the game. The next decision, I was playing with the design of what's the death system look like. Now, I had interest in doing like a roguelike, you know. The question is like to do RPG or to not do RPG, right? Um, so as an indie developer, I've been warned away from getting too deep into dynamic RPG balancing. That can become a nightmare, you know, if you have to collect resources and gain strength while that can be too much to handle and test for a game. It could get out of hand. It's more suited for larger studio companies. So kind of thinking about the idea like, using random level generation. I like that idea, but that kind of thing complements roguelike gameplay because you're replaying the levels that you've played before and shuffling up the rooms. The levels don't get as stale as fast. It adds to that's. But it doesn't really work if each room has some sort of stealth puzzle. If you're going through and it's shuffled around and you see the same stealth puzzle you've done 6 times already, that's not really gonna fly. So more and more I was leaning to like the decision of no, it's not gonna be a roguelike. You're not gonna be doing any backtracking or starting over or dynamic RPG elements where you're getting stronger in each run through. That's not how it's going to be. Leaning more towards it's going to be a tried and true, mostly linear experience. The levels will be laid out mostly linear. There will be branching, like side rooms and stuff, side branches, or side branches that go off and connect to the main branch, something like that. But it'll be mostly linear, and that's for your first game as an indie developer. That's more of a safe bet. That I think I wouldn't want to get crazy with the roguelike and RPG, unless I really felt I could pull it off successfully, you know. Um, so I so I was doing more thinking, and that kind of moved on to Friday. I wasn't satisfied to go back to the editor to start continuing development. So I took another day to really answer some more questions about the overall structure of the game, to the design of the game, what it's going to be, how it's going to play, things like this. So one of the things I've seen other games, they're puzzle games, right? So their core elements are puzzles, but the development time, they really struggle doing a clever and unique puzzle for each room. That could take a lot of time being creative like that. So I could do puzzles and stuff, but I think the key is actually vary it up. So maybe one section you're doing stealth, one section action, one is just pure traversal, and you kind of combine them into a variety, so you really don't know what you're going to get in any situation. That way you don't have to do puzzles or stealth puzzles for each and every room. That could become quite a job to actually deliver on. So the next thing I was thinking about was story and narrative and why it's important to have. Now, you could just be going from room to room, progressing to the end, until you beat the final boss, with no narrative. And, retro games sometimes do this, it's like, who knows, who cares? But I think it's important in the modern games to at least have some sort of nod to a narrative, even if it's in the simplest form, the most basic form. It has to be there in some sense. You have to answer the player's questions of, who, what, when, why, where, how. Just so they know they have like an overall objective of what they're trying to accomplish, what the situation is. And leaving that out in a game is kind of like cooking a meal. Yeah, it'll work, but it's not. it's like you're not adding any spices. You're not taking it to the next level with narrative. And it also helps, like, if you have a narrative, to design your levels around, right? As you progress through the story narrative, each kind of level environment should be tuned to that, narrative. Um, so by doing that, I think as an indie developer, I don't have a big budget to do like hiring voice actors and localizing voice. So I'm gonna stick to um, text, right? And I think the market will forgive on that. But at least it's something, and you can localize text, I think, easier um, than voice narrative. So a lot of smaller games do that, and it's not a big deal. Like the market's not going to be like, oh, it's not, there's no voice acting and facial animations. Like, yeah, what do you want from an indie developer? Maybe if I get around to doing a second game, you can add those sort of more expensive features, right? Yeah. So putting more thought into each location of each level to fit the narrative, and I was coming up with some interesting ideas, even if it's a draft. So it's enough of a framework to kind of feel good about, even if it probably needs some more refinement later on, but it's enough to get me back into the editor and start feeling comfortable about hashing out level prototypes and structure. Um, some of the concepts, I think you're starting out the game with no memory, just like you know as much as the audience. You probably do some like sort of prison escape thing, and it lends itself, that kind of gameplay lends itself well to stealth. So you're gaining abilities along the way, and you're gaining like flashbacks of what happened, and it's kind of like a mystery you're unraveling. You're getting information piece by piece, a puzzle revealing the actual greater truth along the way. Um, and you, as the headset, you're kind of like the Overwatch, the guide. You can actually interact and open up paths for the player to follow. Um, so, but then at the end of the week, I kind of realized I'm kind of constrained um, to having the story narrative follow my actual environmental assets that I own, because as part of this project, I am really not gonna be focusing on creating, very minimal, creating any additional like environment assets, animations, um, things like that. So if I don't have any assets for a prison environment, I can't really obtain it through the asset store. How would I actually create a level around that narrative? Do I have to change the narrative, or maybe I can adapt the assets I do have to fit that narrative environment? Yeah, who knows? But taking a look at my asset library, I have a bunch of Cinti low poly assets like what you see here, and that's fine for prototyping, but I don't think that's going to cut it for final production. I'm wanting a more realistic look with, if you look at the textures, they are very, I'd say, they're very basic. They're not very realistic. And also, if you look closely, let's see if I can, that's not allowing me to move forward here, but that's all right. You can see it's very low poly, meaning it's kind of jagged edges, not smooth. So I bought a lot of these assets that are more realistic and good looking. So I'm going for more of a medium mesh, medium texture detail. I think I'm mixing these Cinti assets, it's not really going to work unless I go into Blender and rework them to be more realistic manually. But they can still be used for rough prototyping, I think. I went and bought some more tools, like I do every month. I have more tools to add to my collection and more assets on sale. One of the tools is to actually get all my assets out of the project into another project, an asset dump, and then manage my assets externally and only import the assets that I'm actually using inside my game when I need them. that'll slim down the project significantly and probably improve run times. Um, so that being said, I took the time to take a step back and kind of envision the project's roadmap going forward. Next week, I kind of want to work with all the tools that are in my asset library and get things organized with the assets and kind of figure out all these new tools that I bought in order how to employ them in a future encounter situation. And that's probably what I'll be doing next week before I decide on something else, which is probably getting to starting prototyping the first level, um, the structure of the first level, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. So that's about it for now. I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.